The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Tell me when.
Ding, you're on, baby. Clang, clang. And I guess Bart just wants a fill. So, hey, everybody, welcome to the Winemakers. I'm John Myers.
Bordeaux Blanc.
I want some of that
Full
wine.
crew today, man. Sam, Bart, Brian, and Pam Strayer. Wine Country Geographic is your company, and you're a wine writer and journalist. New book called Slow Wine out just like today, huh?
Yeah, it's shipping now.
Welcome.
I mean,
Slow wine.
new book, new issue.
The new edition.
Annual.
new edition,
It's an
the new annual.
Right, yeah. Slow Wine USA is the place to, Slow Wine Guide to find, Slow Wine Guide.
There you go. Tell me about Slow Wine.
So Slow Wine is an international movement. It's part of Slow Food, which explains the title.
The opposite of fast food, John.
Right.
The opposite of fast wine.
Exactly.
Right.
I don't get any fast wine. I'm not sure I've ever had any fast
John,
wine.
we know your background. You drank plenty of fast wine.
We weaned you off of fast wine and McDonald's.
Hey, hey.
Right. Well, they're
Fast
from the
cars.
beginning.
McDonald's, baby.
Right.
Fast cars, fast food, fast wine.
and loose women.
Yes. All three.
What about loose men?
No.
You're
Thank
right.
you.
Right.
No,
Thank you.
Loose people.
I know some loose men.
Thank God you're here.
Yeah, you've worked in the wine industry for 40 years. You definitely know.
I know a few of those.
And they're probably listening.
Well,
Hey, Jeff.
Well, anyway, it's not loose wine, it's slow wine. And in Italy, Slow Wine Guide is the biggest selling wine book. And highly
Wow.
sought after.
That's
to
really
be in.
amazing.
It is amazing. And so we are their U.S. Cousins, and we just do American wineries. This year we have 400. Last year we had 300. And I would say we are heavily artisanal boutique.
Well, I
and
can imagine.
terroir-driven wines.
so define slow wine for us.
Well, I think that was part of it, artisanal and boutique. But the other part of it that makes us really unique is that we don't feature any wines that are grown with Roundup. So that's
positive, then.
That set
Yeah.
us in a different category. And Esther Mobley gave us rave reviews last year for that.
No, that's
Bart's
highly,
excitable this morning.
highly dingworthy.
And it takes a lot of work. We have 12 contributing writers, and then myself and Deborah Parker Wong are the co-editors. And we have a fabulous website, Slow Wine USA, and you can go there and see an excerpt from the book. What makes us truly unique, besides the wines that we feature, is that we are more transparent than any other guide. So at the bottom of every winery listing, you'll find a section that tells you what fertilizer was used, what kind
really?
of plant protection.
Wow.
We don't use copper.
Uh-huh.
It's down here. I don't know.
Okay, well, then
Just-
we'll change it in the second
In the
edition,
next
which will be
round.
like next week.
Okay.
Maybe
Well,
it was on from the previous year.
that's a good question. Is who gives you the
The
information? Is it
wineries.
right?
And
And I think maybe there was a previous editor who we worked with who got that information when he came in the first edition.
uh-huh.
Yeah. So,
Well, we're
shout out
always
to-
here
shout out to
for
Jeremy.
you, Sam.
I love you, man.
So let
Well,
us
it's just,
know
I mean,
anytime.
that was a couple years ago, right?
You know what? I believe that Jeremy Parson
Oh, put that in.
came here on just after the fires in 17. I think was the first time so the first edition came out in 2018, maybe then, Pam.
I think so. That sounds about right.
So we're on.
Yeah.
Did you use
six.
copper then?
I don't
Well,
think so. You know, it was.
But that was a traditional organic.
traditional. Copper's used in lots of places as for mildew and mold control.
Right.
Well, copper's used not in just organic vineyards. The vast
No, I
majority.
understand that.
Yeah,
Right.
elsewhere, right.
And when he was here, he was a winemaker or vineyard viticulturist from Italy was here with him, and Jeremy speaks Italian. I sometimes speak English, so I think that maybe there was something lost in translation there.
But I think the interesting thing to be said about this is with it changing all the time. I mean, practices change, right?
Yes.
And we're all learning things. And it was really interesting, Pam, in our conversation where you mentioned one vineyard company was using a different type of weed killer. So they could say they weren't using Roundup.
Glufosinate ammonium, yeah.
Right, and that's just a subtle change. It still has glyphosate in it.
Glyphosate, yeah. Well, no, it doesn't have glyphosate.
See,
but
that's why I don't.
it's a contact.
That's why I don't use it,
herbicide.
because I can't say it.
Don't use any products you can't pronounce.
Right.
That's good advice.
Well, I will say, Sam.
But I guess the point is that things change, right? And,
they do.
And so
and
that's
why we have
these
an annual guide.
right, and that's why these books are so valuable, because they do change, and you need to see. There's obviously new people that come into it, and practices change, and that way it's more education for people.
Well,
that's all I was trying to get.
I will also say Adutet does not have copper.
Okay, good. Thank God.
And also, we'll be coming out with the second edition any week now, where we compile
the
these.
Second edition of the 2004 version.
2024, yeah.
Okay.
So we're making corrections as we go.
That's
because
amazing.
it's print on demand.
It is,
and we can do that.
It's a living, and that's maybe.
Maybe
I'm like taking a step too far on this, but slow wines are living wines. Wines
and
that
we're
are alive.
Fast on the corrections.
And the wine guide, the slow wine guide, is a living document.
It's
right?
an organic growth.
It's an organic
thing.
thing. But I think that it is not to be overstated that this is the only guide for wine on the planet that at the very baseline. And this isn't, this is the time of year that all these top 100 wines of the year lists come out and all this bullshit. This is the only guide on the planet that is baseline, no Roundup. And, work from there and weed it out from... Weed it out, you see what I did there, right? Weed it out from there. But as a baseline, that makes, the importance of which really just, it cannot be understated.
Sam.
That's exactly right, and that's where I was trying to get to. The point is, what's the difference in that product that you mentioned to me and quote unquote Roundup? If they still
say it, Bart, say it.
It's glufosinate ammonium versus glyphosate.
Okay.
And so thanks to John Roncaroni, the weed control expert extraordinaire who used to be with UCA&R as a weed control specialist who just retired. Glufosinate ammonium is a contact herbicide, and Roundup is systemic.
Right, okay.
So, and we don't say that all the wineries in the guide are no Roundup. The wines that we review are no Roundup. So they could have other wines that aren't. And we try to indicate that also because we tell you what kind of certification they have. And it will say some of the vineyards are organic.
And again, I mean, I think that's something, as our conversation earlier today about Napa Green, I mean, when we had Napa Green on, they didn't have a stand on Roundup. Like you could use Roundup.
Right.
But their goal later on was to show a path to not using it.
Right.
And I think that's important. There are vineyards, there are wineries that make wines without it, but the fact is that may only be 2% of their whole production, right?
Right.
And they need a path to get there.
Right. Well, what we found in the American version versus the Italian guide is in Italy, people don't tend to buy grapes as much as they do here. They have an estate. That's their winery. That's their wine. Yeah. Whereas we have a really complicated task of parsing through wineries that buy a tremendous number of grapes. So, kudos to our team for the amazing job they do.
So, and let's be real on that. The wineries also have a complicated task of maintaining the knowledge, from year to year of exactly what gets used in the vineyards that they purchase from and what makes it into each bottling.
Right.
Right.
Because that's, again, that's just full of it today. That's a fluid situation. From year to year, what comes into the winery and how it was treated, and then what makes it into the bottle is changes from day to day.
Well, and it's hard because if you have a larger winery like one I worked at where they had sustainable, organic, and biodynamic, there had to be a lot of discussion about what happened when,
Right.
and it wasn't as simple as just top everything with this or, use that, because you could screw up a certification.
Mm-hmm.
You could declassify wine without even realizing it.
Well, I think that one of the big problems is certification. So I'm very pro certification personally, but Slow Wine Guide allows for non-certified people to participate. So the wine doesn't have to be certified, nor does the vineyard. So you have to be transparent. You have to tell us what you are doing. And then we can convey that to the consumer who can make their own decision. Right. Because so many people don't think that certification is so onerous and so expensive, which it's, well, I won't speak to that, but my opinion is that it's not expensive. Especially for the kudos that you get, the bragging points you get. And more we're seeing. So one really super interesting thing to me that I covered recently was the Napa Valley grape growers. And they had their annual teach-in called Rootstock. It's a whole day. They all get together and have speakers. And this year they decided to do it all on weed control. And they had a really great data person, an analyst who is in the wine industry, do a calculation about where the trends had been going in the last 10 years in Napa on Roundup. And basically half of the Roundup use stopped as of 5 years ago when that first big lawsuit came out with the big win for the plaintiffs.
I was going to ask, both of you guys, your estimate on the percentage of Roundup use wineries California versus worldwide.
She'd be the...
Well,
I don't know the worldwide statistics, but I can tell you, like, in the three biggest wine-producing countries in Europe, the organic certified is 18%.
Okay.
In Napa, it's probably about 13-14%. In Sonoma, it's like 3 or 4%.
Dismal.
It's really sad.
really?
Yeah.
And I would think it would be higher here.
Well, I
Just
think
because I know you, Sam. That's it.
Well,
We wish.
We've clouded
We
we've jaded your judgment on this. John.
Yes.
I mean, John, it's a grain of sand at the beach.
Yeah.
Right? Like, Phil farmed organic vineyards. There's not that many of them.
There's probably 50,000 acres of vineyards in Sonoma County. Of that, take away the Napa properties, 500 of it is Enterprise Vineyards farmed of Sonoma County. So that's a tiny fraction. Is that even 1%? No. That's a 0.1% or some shit. I don't know. I didn't do math. But, and then there's maybe some others. But if there's 5,000 acres of organic vines in Sonoma County, I'd be shocked.
Because most of it falls under the sustainable model,
well,
right?
and that's I've been rallying against Sonoma County Sustainable since it came out, because exactly what I said, when it first, the pro Roundup rules of Sonoma County Sustainable came out, people are going to take Sonoma County Sustainable because it's easier, and you get to say something nice about yourself, and organic certification will fall, and that's what's happened.
So it also should be pointed out that organic and biodynamic certifications are legally recognized, and those are the only ones that we include in the certification section in this guide. We do discuss sustainability programs in the text of the guide if a winery wants, or if the writer feels like they want to include that information. But I think a lot of wineries are sort of like off-put. They're like, well, why don't you put sustainability certifications in the certifications section? Because they are not widely agreed upon, and they're too confusing on a national basis. There's so many of them.
I think the fact, just what you said originally, is they're different. Like Sonoma Sustainable is different than Lodi Rules, which is different than, other
Right.
sustainability.
Well, and
practice.
some of them
Right.
have an actual bar, like Lodi Rules. They have a pretty well-defined bar, and so does SIP certified.
Right.
Whereas the Wine Institute one and the Sonoma one are very, very broadly defined.
Right. And you know.
When you go back to, you said that basically organic certification and biodynamic certification are the only ones that have legal basis. Is that because of like the National Organic Program? Is it- that's
Exactly.
what
The
establishes that?
USDA as an actual government agency with actual, enforcement of law.
Right. Okay. And then the rest of them are just marketing.
Well, they can say what they want. I, many years ago, did an expose on a certain person in Sonoma who flouted all of the rules of their certification, and there was no enforcement.
Yep. Do you want to say who that was?
No.
Oh, okay, fine. But you can look it up on your blog.
I don't think it's. I don't know if it's
Okay.
even still there.
I mean, let's face it, it's all about the weeds. Hence the reason why the rootstock thing was about the weeds. It's like, about the hardest thing that we do to our vineyards is spray Roundup, right? I mean, the other
think we should talk
herbicide
about-
practices are not as damaging.
Well,
right?
I think
'Cause-
actually
'cause-
there's too much attention on Roundup,
Okay.
if you ask me. Because organic encompasses much more than that. So I'm about to go to the fabulous second gathering of the Vineyards and Biodiversity Conference, which will be in Avignon in January 18th and 19th.
You need someone to carry your bags.
Well, I would love it.
You're going to be at the DTC conference that week, Brian.
Oh, never mind.
Oh well.
Get your tickets now.
So it's a lot about wildlife, biodiversity, rewilding, and super interesting things. I would say that while people here talk about being sustainable, in France the whole there's a huge movement toward biodiversity, and you see it on their websites. You hear them talk about it. It's like a national anthem. So I think that is slowly coming to California. There's a really interesting project in Oakville now with Favia and the owners of Quintessa.
Right.
And they are rewilding and planting and, doing all kinds of cool stuff. And I think that's going to be a lot more prevalent here. But anyway, the vanguard of it is in Avignon. And they have fantastic scientists. The last time I did write a blog post about it at the first conference. And they have professors from Geisenheim who are doing really interesting historical landscape work where they see how the vineyard row orientations used to be 50 years ago, or how many little tree plantings there were interspersed in a vineyard that aren't there anymore. And we're just talking like 50 years ago. They have old aerial photographs and stuff that you can just see. And they went through and cataloged. And they also look at the vineyard impact on bird life. And the fungicides, they're not healthy for birds. Right. And I remember going to Napa Green like 10 years ago, and somebody who was the head of it took me on his vineyard tour and showed me all those bird boxes, and I was very impressed. And then I came home and read the Pesticide Use Report, which is like my Bible, and I was shocked. I was so chagrined because they're using things that are neurotoxins for birds and bees, and those are really commonly used. So we need to look at all of these certifications and then kind of, align with the one that fits our personal preferences. And so Wine Guide allows you to do that.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about Roundup, it's an easy target, but because it's harder to talk about, pre-emergent systemic fungicides.
Yeah.
Just doesn't roll off the tongue as well, but,
Right.
I can't believe I want to say this. If there was a vineyard that didn't use those but did use Roundup, I'd probably drink those wines before I drank a wine.
Really?
Yeah.
Just those are things that are literally getting sprayed onto the plant and are intended to sort of be incorporated into the biology of the grapevine.
Right.
And again, the moms group who did the 10 wines from California that all tested positive
Moms
for
across
glyphosate.
America. Yeah.
Again, easy targets.
Right.
Well, and
but let's talk about pre-emergent fungicides in conventionally grown wines. I'm sure they're in the wine.
Yeah.
They have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah. I mean, I thought that's what you were talking about.
Well,
with the
yeah,
neurotoxins and stuff.
Yeah, and I would also say, the information people get about Roundup is really not very well defined. I used to be in the health journalism world. I brought Dr. Dean Adele onto the web and worked out with many famous epidemiologists and did health risk stuff for many years. And the far greater risk from Roundup is eating non-organic grain products where the wheat or whatever is sprayed right before harvest to be a
that's
desiccant.
right.
And that practice is outlawed in some European countries, but it's not outlawed here. And potatoes, the same thing. So what you want to do first is avoid those products. And then there's a fantastic film that just came out last week called Into the Weeds. And I just posted about it on my blog today.
We'll post all this.
And what is your
okay.
blog? Say your blog real quick.
Wine Country Geographic. And you go there and go over to the blog. It's actually winecountrygeographic.blogspot.com, but Wine Country Geographic will get you headed in the right direction. And so Into the Weeds is this fantastic documentary made by a Canadian documentary filmmaker about the case of Dwayne Johnson, who was the first big court case which made headlines around the world when he
Not The
was-
Rock.
Not The Rock, right?
Okay.
No. Yeah. Although he does have he has some music stuff going on, which you'll see in the film. He had a big spray accident, so he wasn't using it according to the professional guidelines. He wasn't wearing PPE that was kosher, and he called the company and asked for help after his body broke out in all these rashes after he had a big spray accident, and they didn't do anything, and they haven't warned anybody, and that has been the big issue in the court cases. Is that they failed to warn. And they're still fighting in court to this day in California, trying to avoid California sticking regulations on them, saying they have to say it.
And this is specifically for Roundup, or for?
That's specifically for Roundup. Okay. And there's new research coming out all the time about the dangers of glyphosate. But what we see mostly is in the Roundup Ready areas, where there's massive aerial spraying. Women who are pregnant in the area have lower birth weight babies. A new study from UC Berkeley and others just came out with some more details. But the best study to help contribute to...
Will you define that real quick, the Roundup Ready, just for those who don't,
who
don't know what that means?
Why don't you... Actually, you could define that.
Okay, so...
Go ahead.
So what you're talking about is like a Roundup Ready crop, so like a Monsanto seed, right. Particularly corn, wheat, soybean, something that is, I guess probably not wheat because of the desiccation problem, that are immune to Roundup.
Right.
And so you plant those crops, and then you can spray everything with Roundup as often as you need to. Right. Because the plant that you're trying to grow won't be affected by it, but everything else will be, including apparently like the pregnant moms who live next door. Right. Or not even next door, but in the town.
All of Iowa.
Right. And the thing about it is that's just one aspect of the things that they're genetically modifying. Like, my friend George, God rest his soul. No, he's still alive, but he sold his soul. He's a lobbyist for Monsanto. And, he's told me about a product that there's a insecticide bred into the plant so it kills a weevil or something, and I said, but what's the effect on that of the people eating the plant? He goes, we're doing studies on it.
Well, they did studies on it, but they didn't really sufficiently study it. And Amigo Bob used to tell me the story of how everyone went to...
That's your Amigo Bob.
Oh, okay, great. Amigo Bob, who was a great organic farmer and brought many people into organic certification and started CCOF, which is the major accreditation agency for wine growers. Though not the only one. Amigo Bob used to tell me stories about how everyone went to jail who was the people who first did the first lab testing for Monsanto. And like all the rodents that died, they just threw out of the study, and 3 people went to jail.
For falsifying stuff?
Yeah,
okay,
right.
yeah.
And the EPA originally ruled against Roundup. And has never been revealed what the other ingredients are besides glyphosate. And in fact, one guy just last month won a huge lawsuit, $1 billion lawsuit in St. Louis, because they attributed some of the lethal qualities to the non-glyphosate substances that are in Roundup. So there's like an ongoing, there could be the soap opera days of our lives in Roundup research. But the big study that just is most significant, in my opinion, is the Global Glyphosate Study, which is an international group of people. But it's based in Bologna, Italy, which actually is coincidentally where the Slow Wine International Fair takes place in February. And the University of Bologna has a very long history of scientific excellence. This study is studying 3 types of glyphosate. So regular, just simple glyphosate alone, glyphosate as a formula of Roundup, and then Power Max Roundup, which is much stronger and outlawed in the EU, but legal here and widely used here in the wine grapes world. So
Well, I think that's also an important distinction, that like the Roundup that you go and buy at Home Depot to spray in your backyard is not as potent as the Roundup that is used in commercial agricultural.
Right. I think the biggest health concerns people have, and legitimately so, about Roundup in wine country are overspray extending into schools or schoolyards. And the state is not adequately protecting
Homes in the area too. I mean,
residential. Yeah. And
I think about it, the school that my brother went to, the Carneros Elementary School out there in Carneros, there was vineyards from fence to fence all around it.
well, left and right off of Arnold. There are
Right.
plenty of homes and plenty of
Right.
vineyards being sprayed.
right. So for my money, you get the same value, if not better, by buying organically grown wine or wine that isn't grown with Roundup. And the only way to find those wines really is this book.
There you go. It's a good description of it. Fantastic.
I feel like there's a lot of places that we can go and talk about this, but will you briefly just tell people where they can find their own copy of Slow Wine
You
Guide?
can buy the book online at slowwineusa.com.
Okay.
You can also buy it from the very prestigious Académie du Vin, which is an international distributor, just became the largest distributor of wine books in the world, and they carry it. So if you're in Europe, that might be easier for you.
Sam,
and
that'll make your MasterCard bill look very sophisticated.
Well,
I think
knowing that book is that bookstore is available makes me want to look at it.
Yeah, I know. It's going to make my MasterCard very maxed, is what it's going to do.
What's this book run?
It's $25.
We'll just buy this copy if you don't mind.
No, that's not the final version. So you want the up-to-date one. You might want the second edition.
Okay. We'll wait.
Well, I mean, this has been great, Pam. And, I guess for me, and something that we do here is trying to inform people, what goes on and what things mean, that are truthful. And it just seems like there's just not enough work done to helping people. I guess you've got to want to get away from Roundup and from, pesticides. But it seems like we need to give them a clearer path at times.
Well, I think watching Into the Weeds will give you some motivation when you see how 25,000 people, homeowners who used it residentially, have filed lawsuits against Monsanto and Bayer. So definitely, it should, in my opinion, it should be a restricted material because its carcinogenicity is not well defined.
They took chloridane off the market, and I remember having a home sprayed in Indianapolis for termites. It's like, we sold it,
Right. I think the court of public opinion is going to weigh in here, and I think that's that was a motivator for both Napa Green deciding that it has to be eliminated, phased out of its members' vineyards by 2026. And they also said that glufosinate ammonium has to be sprayed out at a later date. Phased out. So there's a lot of soul searching, I think, that's going on in the upper end of the wine world, and you see that by the Napa Valley grape growers finding out that in the last 5 years the Roundup use has halved. So I think that's very commendable, and it shows that it can be done. What Napa Green is offering its members now as a way is help along the path.
Right.
And so here's the toolkit. Here's what you need to do: technical assistance, financial assistance. It's a very forward-thinking program, and I think it could gain a lot of traction in the marketplace.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked at it at depth, but I read about it and stuff, and so it's something definitely to look at. So.
Am I the only one that thought that Roundup was illegal? Why did I think that? I thought after that suit that, like...
Nope.
It was, if I remember right, it was off the shelf at Friedman Brothers for a period of time, but I think it's back. And you know, and there have been county agencies that have stopped using it, and whatnot, and city
it's been
agencies.
banned by a lot of cities on their
so
municipal
that might be
properties.
a little bit, Brian, what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
I know they've
school districts and stuff have
and
have
city
gotten rid of
councils.
it. Yeah.
Like Santa Rosa
Yeah,
area.
many
I know that just
many
made it.
cities in wine country have banned it, but they can only ban it from municipalities. And other people have had that misperception too, Brian.
Well, I'm really interested in that guy's misspray accident. I wonder what the hell happened actually, and you know the reactions he had were. I mean,
Watch the movie.
yeah, is that in?
Oh
the
yeah,
weeds?
it's actually in the
weeds?
trailer. The trailer starts off with him showing you the exact spot where it happened.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay,
Pam,
well,
I was recently around a group of people in the industry, and one of them, being a grower, made the comment that there's, you know, that organic is more expensive, and that there's really no there's no compensation for it, and there's not, and just I'm wondering. I know maybe you need to have more people looking for it and willing to pay more money to help growers, convince growers to do it. Are you seeing a trend? Like, is that happening? Are people showing more interest? Are people?
Yeah. So, look at Craig Ledbetter in Lodi, right? Not Mr. Pro Organic by a mile over the course of his career, but he is now. He has some good paying clients who actually are helping him go biodynamic. And he's convinced that it's the future, and that otherwise you're in a race to the bottom. I would say that there's plenty of evidence. The amount of organic acreage in Napa grew 38% over the last 3 years. So the high end and the low end you're seeing. And Scheid on Monterey County has 3,000 acres of estate vines. They're going totally organic. They got a big new deal with Whole Foods. Whole Foods been a little late to the party. Bonterra's on fire.
You know what? Shout out to Bonterra. I really like those guys. I like everything they do from day one. To me, it's the organically farmed, consumer-friendly pricing wine.
Right, and you're going to see also those folks in Lake County, Shannon, are hot on the path too, and they have some great $20 bottles. Not everything is fully certified organic there, but a couple of their labels are. Yeah, and they're just doing amazing things with sheep, and they're all estate. Yeah, Bonterra has really shifted the bulk of their sourcing out of Mendocino County, which is sad, and then down to cheaper wine regions.
But the amazing thing with Bonterra is it's gone through several ownership changes since the Fetzers were involved, and it hasn't just been completely, destroyed.
Well, people in Mendocino are pretty unhappy about the shift in sourcing.
Yeah, I'm sure they are.
And feeling abandoned.
Yeah,
And the whole company was set up to create that market and for them to have that opportunity. So now what you find actually is that on the open market, all the natural winemakers are sourcing from Mendocino.
Right.
And, you have people like Dave Cobal, who used to be the head of vineyards at Fetzer, at Bonterra, saying, if it's not organic, it's not going to get sold to these independent winemakers.
Yeah.
And then you're seeing in the Central Coast really cool stuff happening. Oh, dear, I'm going to forget his name. But right near... I'll have to come back to it. But anyway, there's one grower who's diversified into all these specialty varietals and is organic, and so is also catering to this that same market.
Yeah.
But that's a very specialized market.
Right. I mean, but if we can keep growing that market, It encourages more growers to turn towards that, as opposed to a grower who actually grows a little bit of product organic, but for him to say that there's no upside to it.
You have to find your buyer.
Very much bugged me.
You have to find your buyer.
Yeah. Well, I think he's being paid to farm it that way, and it's just a different practice. It's not his norm, right? So.
Right, and that's a big part of it. It's really good to talk about that, the transition, because people don't like to change so much, right? And they're scared, they're afraid. So I think a lot of hand-holding and TLC and encouragement, and I think in Napa what registered on the Richter scale was people going, do you use Roundup? And then what do you say?
Well,
you say,
how long does it take?
No, I use
Fume Blanc.
How long does it take?
Like 28, there was a 28% increase in glufosinate ammonium use.
With the 50% drop in Roundup drop.
So how long does it take to get Roundup out of the fields and out of the vines?
Well,
I mean, if you've used them, it's systemic. Can you still use the rootstock, or does it flow out? Eventually?
It goes out. A lovely man I've interviewed several times is named Bob Kremer, and he worked for the USDA as the head glyphosate guy for 20 years. And he is still a professor emeritus in St. Louis. And he is still doing research. But he says it's anywhere, allegedly it's like 3 years, but it's actually much longer than that.
For certification, it's 3 years.
Yeah.
If you can prove that you've done it for 3 years, then you can be certified.
Right.
And you think it's longer?
Well, he thinks it's longer.
Right.
I don't.
You can see that it's, vineyards that convert still don't grow anything underneath the vine row
for a while.
Several years. And then the things that start growing before the things you want growing are the noxious weeds that are more resistant.
And I do have an article coming out on winebusiness.com about Napa Green, and I think that's where there's a link to Kremer's research. If not, there's a link in the Napa Valley Grape Grower story. But sadly, he just told me on our last phone call that he has cancer as a result of dealing with all of these chemicals his whole career. But he's still, I consider him a great authority.
We used to watch airplanes in Iowa spraying crops because it was cool to watch. Amazing.
Well, one of my friends died from the DDT watching.
Exactly. That was the area with DDT. It was paraquat. It was whatever. Agent Orange.
So I think the good news is there is progress, right? That Napa Valley growers could have their Roundup use and just spontaneously. There was no concerted effort. There was no Napa Green. There was just like, hey man, we got to do this, right? We don't want to say yes.
That's the big deal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Do you use it? No. This is a fascinating book. I was flipping through.
Oh, I know. Sorry, I just got caught up in it, and I was.
Yeah. When you start to read about people that
we know,
and what they're doing and the wines that they're making, and people that we could probably sit here and just poach a bunch of great interviews, a bunch of great podcast guests out of the book, right?
Well,
exactly what I was thinking, Sam. Exactly.
Right next to us is Ward 4, which we've talked about having her on the podcast. Yeah,
we have everyone who, from size-wise, one guy makes 100 cases of wine a year. We have a lot of teeny-weeny little artisanal people. There's a lot happening on the Central Coast. I noticed this year because I edit the 400 wineries, and there's a lot happening in terms of different varietals being grown, much more diversity.
Who's the biggest adapter so far? Anybody with major case production?
Scheid
family
and
down on
Shannon.
Highway 101.
Shannon up in Lake County.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Shannon's super cool because they have all these sheep year round, which is very hard to pull off year round.
I mean, to me, I don't know, is Craig Ledbetter, I know Craig's uncle, and I had met his father, I mean, this is for Vino Farms that he is representing. I mean,
and they're a finance-driven company.
Correct. And I mean, like, when I first met Jim Ledbetter and asked him where his vineyard was, very naively, and he looked at me and he says, "We're everywhere."
Yeah, 17,000 acres they farm.
Yeah,
they don't own the 17,000.
Right,
they
but
own
they
2,000.
farm. I mean. That's crazy, and the fact that they're going to start farming organically, and you have to hope that they'll start converting more and more acreage. That's huge, and that's old school farming kind of thinking. So.
Right, and it's finance driven.
Right.
He's like saying, I mean, I did a 2-part interview that was in winebusiness.com, which you can find all this stuff. There's links to all my articles on Wine Country Geographic in the wine journalism section. And, I was so impressed with everything he told me. I had to, sort of pinch myself who I was hearing this from. But he's quite adamant, and he's been doing it 5 or 6 years. He says his whole team is on board. He's really happy about it. He said it's not that hard.
And it comes down
costs
to
a little more, but...
Right.
I
mean, it costs
it,
more, but they're doing it.
Well, and I think we should explore that a little bit, because I was just flipping through. Gloria Ferrar is not in here yet.
Yeah,
I think that's
we
somebody
don't get everyone.
No, and I
just because it is a person power issue.
Right, and I totally get that, and it's just something to put on your radar.
Oh no, she's on my radar.
I believe that they're. This is their certification year or last year?
Yes, they're certified. Yeah.
And Maya Kamas Olds, friend of the podcast, said that when she was the GM there, sort of drove that conversion, that they actually managed to reduce farming costs while converting to organic.
Wow.
So I think that, and again, that was 3 years ago probably. So maybe those things have changed. Everything is more expensive. So who freaking knows? But even if it's
well, it's really site-specific.
A slight that makes a lot of sense. I'm sure it's site-specific. But if there's even slight increases, and all of a sudden your fruit is worth, and this is, I'm sure, what is driving the folks out in Lodi, if your fruit prices can go up a couple $100 a ton, and make up for those increased costs on the farming side, at the end of the day, you're actually going to be in the positive because of a shift to organic, right?
Well, Ivo at Gergich is adamant that it's cheaper. That he says his costs are $11,000 an acre in Napa, whereas the average is $15,000.
And Mike just passed away this week.
Yeah.
I mean, something to be said about. Sam, that deserves for sure.
Yeah.
We all sit here because of Mike Gergich.
Right.
Shoulders of giants.
Because farming practices, you can reduce tractor passes and all those things, and those things add up.
Pam, we are just accepting your knowledge for what it is. What made you get into this, and how did you focus so much on this? What's your background?
That's a really good question. So originally I was doing health journalism. I was the editor-in-chief of healthcentral.com, which was Dr. Dean Adele's online foray.
Those of you that don't know Dr. Dean Adele, anyone that grew up in the Bay Area, we know Dr. Dean from watching him on the news at night, and he would give health advice. And
didn't he have like the readers that you'd buy at the...
Yep, that too. But we didn't talk about that on
like Joey Benziger. Shout out Joey Benziger.
Yeah.
Phil Couturier has a message for you, by the way.
So from healthcentral.com, I pivoted. I was hired as the editor-in-chief of DNA.com. And that was a genetic discovery company under Jim Clark, big Silicon Valley legend, who started Netscape and WebMD. And I was also in charge of all the genetics channels on WebMD, both for consumers and physicians. They had 2 different outlets then. And so I was working with the best genetic scientists, people in the world, writing stuff with them, for intelligent adoption of genetic testing, for people to understand when they need to talk to their doctor about issues. And then when that ended, I learned through friends about the Pesticide Use Report. And I was blown away. So this is public information available from the state in aggregated form and in individual specific level from any ag commissioner in any county ag commissioner. It's not available in other states, just California. And it is an amazing repository. So you can see everything that is used. You have to apply. You have to, just say, I'd like to see this information. And then they send it to you. And then you have to start understanding what's organic and what's not organic. in terms of a certification, so that you'll know what is more a chemical of concern. Right. And when I found out about that, I was blown away. I was like, why are we looking for cancer genetic tests when we're just spraying carcinogens all over the landscape?
Thank you.
I went through what I call my Debbie Downer phase. I was just like, I can't believe it. And then I was like, well, look, there's all these people who don't do that, and they're not going down the drain financially. In fact, they seem to be thriving. In fact, they seem to be taking up more oxygen in the top 10 lists or top 100 or the top wines more and more. And actually really interesting research has come out now that looked at, an enormous number of French wine scores over a 20-year period. And organics gave basically a 6-point bump in the ratings, and biodynamics gave like a 12-point bump. So
we saw a report similar to that, and it was nice because it was like proof positive to show consumers that not only is it a feel good aspect of buying those wines, but they actually scored higher in blind tastings.
Right, on average.
On average,
we don't want to say every organic because
not every.
We all know
wine,
how many factors go into it.
Yeah,
but it is a significant finding. So to answer your question, so I put those things together and I started making the first apps on organically grown wines in the United States. So I had Organically Napa, Organically Sonoma,
which is I think about the time that I
dad,
right. You I think you talked to my dad before that, but that's when it was when I was sort of starting all of this.
Right.
And I wanted to make sure that we were on the app.
Right, and you were. Anyway, so that went really well, except for the app platform that I wrote them all on was disbanded by its founders, and so that kind of went kaputski. So I haven't come back with something else, but that got me going. And I also felt like the organic people who were certified didn't have a voice, so I started my blog, which is approaching 1 million page views. Let's put it over the top.
There you go.
And just being sort of a conduit for information, and so that's where it started.
And where are you from?
I'm from all over, but I was raised in New England and lived in Maine, and went to school in Western Massachusetts and moved here 38 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah.
I should have moved so much earlier than I did. It only took me 60 years to get here. I just remember wanting to move to San Francisco when I was like 16.
You were smart. No, I wanted to go to Berkeley in college, but my parents wouldn't let me. So, but I made it anyway.
Now I want to go to Berkeley in college, but I can't get in.
Or you can't afford it.
Yeah, exactly. God forbid you get in and saddle yourself and your family in debt for the rest of your life. Right.
I think it's only about $400,000.
Well, and that's before you have to live in Berkeley.
Right.
I mean, Berkeley might not be it's expensive.
Right.
But then you have to live in these places.
Right.
Like, oh, great, I got a full ride to NYU. Well, now you have to afford to live in New York for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Or the next 4 years or whatever. Right? Anyway. Different soapbox. Different show. Different episode for sure. Quickly, I want to remind everybody about the DTC conference. I dropped a little bit. It's the middle of January, the 17th, 18th in Concord. Early bird registration is probably over by the time you listen to this, but register, especially if you're in the industry selling wine directly to people. We all know it's the only way to make any of this work.
Yep.
Lots of great speakers. We'll be there recording a podcast. Come hang out with us. I think James Joyner is doing one of the speeches.
He is,
one of the keynotes this year. So it's an awesome one. Check out dtcwinesymposium.com and come hang out with us at the Concord Hilton.
Yes.
Who's coordinating hotel rooms?
Jasmine.
I don't think that's anything we need to talk about on the show.
Sorry. But check it out. It's going to be great. There's so much happening in the wine world, regulatorily wise, especially when it comes to shipping, but also the California CRV thing happening. I know you're digging in on that a little bit.
Yeah, I got a couple articles on the website.
Yeah.
One for winebusiness.com, another one for Grape and Wine that explain a lot about it. But the state does have a good program that you can call them.
Okay.
And I'm working on from Pam's helping the folks from Conscious Container, a couple people to have on the show to get a little more information about it.
Well, I've seen people gathering cans and bottles forever.
Right.
What's a wine bottle worth now?
Well, it's not worth anything.
Nothing yet.
And most of it goes into the landfill. And we know that, regardless of what they say about. I mean, there's certainly wine bottles that go into recycling, but most of it goes into landfill, or it's crushed and made into road base. But this hopefully will change some things.
Right,
We'll push that a
and
little bit,
research and evidence in other states shows that it does.
Yeah. So.
And the big, from a just like purely day-to-day operational standpoint, John, is and the targets keep kind of moving around, so it's hard to tell. But when you go to buy a recyclable vessel at 7-Eleven, whether it's a bottle of beer or a can of soda, they're gonna charge. You'll see it as you check out. They're gonna charge you the nickel or the 10 cents or whatever it's worth when they check you out. So now, as wine comes into this program, when you buy a bottle of wine, you will have to pay that 5 cents or the 10 cents or the 25 cents or whatever it's going to be per bottle. But if you look at a bottle of beer or a can of soda, it says somewhere on there CRV,
Right.
CA. So we don't have that on our labels yet. So supposedly it needs to be on all of our labels or all of our bottles starting January 1st, 2024.
Anything bottled after.
Anything bottled after, 2 weeks from now. So everybody's bottling this week, right? Just bottle right now. Put it on paper that it's in bottle right now. No, but really, realistically is now our, labels, which the design of which is every detail is poured over. We have to find some place to put this California redemption value message on the label. So, everybody's back label or front label or wherever you're going to put it is probably going under some level of redesign right now.
Jason Haas posted their new, the addition to theirs.
Right.
And I have to say, they tucked it in really nicely. And it really doesn't, and it doesn't look bad. It just says C. I mean, it's better than government warning, right?
Yeah, just put in
it just
CACRV.
Yeah,
Right?
it doesn't look bad, and it's if it makes some change, then that's the right thing to do.
Well, the bugaboo has been that the people who sell it to you haven't collected it.
Right.
And they have fought it tooth and nail, the big chains.
Right.
And they're still sort of looking for a solution that doesn't involve major change on their end. I don't know what the resolution of that is now, but they want to sell it, but they don't want to be bothered collecting it. Right. And one can understand why that would be, but the idea is polluter pays. So if you're going to put some material into the waste stream, then you have to be responsible for also taking it out of the waste stream.
And you're talking about retailers?
Yeah.
So
Safeway, Raleigh's, etc., etc.
Amazing.
So this begs the question, and this is something that we've been kicking around, and maybe you know the answer, Pam. Maybe this is something they'll talk about at the DTC conference. I would hope at the symposium. So I'm gonna bottle in January 500 cases worth of wine, but realistically, half of those, maybe more, will be sold to people outside of the state of California. All of those wines, am I going to... And again, of those wines, 90% of them will be sold by us and not by a retailer
It doesn't
or third
matter.
party. So if I'm selling wine...
In California.
But if I'm selling wine outside of California...
I don't think it matters, but consult a professional authority.
Great
Sam,
answer.
I'll forward you a couple
If
articles.
it's
and
made in
obviously we're gonna-
California.
If it's made in California...
Yeah, I think that's how it reads.
We have to...
But I think the bigger thing people need to be paying attention to is the wastewater regulations that are coming into
Yeah,
effect.
that's a huge thing that's coming
Yeah.
down.
And I didn't know anything about it. I was assigned to write about it by Wine Business. I was like, oh, I have been on a
wastewater assignment. So much fun.
Right.
Thanks, Cyril.
So sexy, so cool. But as I have become more conversant in it, I am amazed, and I am very proud of this state of California, which I hope doesn't get me lynched. But we need to protect our groundwater, and that's what's happening. And I didn't realize how many egregious incidents had happened. And there's a whole new group of people trying to get in on the action to provide solutions. And so I'm looking at some of those super innovative, cool new things that are happening. So that's exciting. But I know a lot of wineries are like, oh my God, it's too expensive. We can't afford. And they're looking at, the people, the same vendors who create municipal wastewater systems, which is not the scale that wineries need. So... things like the worm composters are great, but they can also be expensive if you have to. It's all about how much land you have and how much room you have to deal with all these things. Anyway, it's kind of a fascinating pivot point right now.
And one that's not being talked about nearly as much as any of these other ones.
No, and the deadlines are coming right up. January 20th, I think it is. You have to submit your plan to the state. And they do have people at the state who know what they're talking about. If you're not a member of the Wine Institute, I think it's a good idea now to become one, because they have hand-holding and easy, they will give you a lot of information about what you need to do to comply.
And again, I mean, another reason maybe too that making wine in a business park isn't such a bad thing, with
Tank
combined,
and
combined processing, multiple wineries sharing processing. And
Mike Martini at Taft Street is featured in the first article that I wrote. And he's got it down to $33, I think, a ton, if I'm not mistaken.
He's been doing it for a long time.
Tank and haul. Well, he had to downgrade his production capacity a little bit to qualify to get in under a level, Tier 2, not Tier 3. So the information has been difficult to parse, but the state just finally put out a graphic that really explains it much more easily. A lot of people are already covered, but a lot of people are not. Right. And it's another one of these mystery zones, just like the CRV.
And if you're building something new, it's going to be built into it. But if you're an existing place that's been around a long time, who knows?
Love that 100-year-old doorbell in here in the tasting house.
I want to give out one quick shout out. Our friends at Conscious Container have found a glass company, and they are now offering a new reusable bottle for sustainability in the wine industry. They have 8 different types of glass, 4 screw cap, 4 cork finish, that say on them reusable bottles. They're built to be washed up to, what did he say here? 8 to 10 washes. Certainly not a lot, but it's a step in the right direction. And then what they're going to do is they have very affordable pricing, and then any glass that you can bring back, they're going to credit you back on the glass that you return to them, so that way they can reprocess and resell it. And they're also offering credits to wineries that can get other wineries to buy into this, to try to get, because they're trying to get enough people to start bringing in glass.
Karen, I know you're listening. Send me some samples.
Yeah.
I just want to give a shout out too to the people that are doing boxes, like you guys.
Yeah.
I had the Bedrock Rosé box. I've gone through 3 of them. All my friends wanted them. It's just so nice to have that on-demand pour thing in your fridge.
The first glass tastes just the same as the last glass.
Yeah.
That is exactly what we've found, is the people who buy 1, buy 5. John, how many of you?
5 or 6.
5 or 6 this summer. It's just like,
Joan loves them.
You have a glass of wine ready for you in your fridge at all times, and when it's folks like us and Bedrock and Topless Creek doing it, they're people who qualify to be in this book. I'm holding up the Slow Wine Guide.
For everyone to see.
It's for all of you out there in podcast land. It makes so much sense. And although I'm not sure it's entirely recyclable, we will be charging 25 cents California CRV when those labels get approved.
Well, I've got one stashed in the pantry.
Right.
pretty much at all times, and it's just easy to toss in the fridge and.
And I was worried we hadn't sold all of them by the time the sort of the season started changing. I think we sold like 5 or 6 of them this weekend out of the tasting house. We're down to the last few. I'm definitely working that into it's kind of a one-off. It was kind of an accident that we were able to do the boxes this year. In fact, I used Bedrock's leftover bags, but I'm working that into the 2024 production planning. Is how can we do another couple hundred boxes? DTC $100 a box. It just like everything about it is.
And how many bottles are in that?
4.
Really?
4.
Yeah, it's a 1.5 liter.
It's a 3
liter.
They're 3 liter boxes.
It's tiny.
Yeah, no, it takes up no room.
Yeah.
Right.
And that the Brian mastered selling the boxes. The first weekend we had them available, he brought out a 3 liter bottle, which is a statement piece, big, and it slams down on the table. And then he put the 3 liter box next to it and said, "This is the same amount of wine." And the 3 liter bottles, our large format pricing cost slightly less than 4 bottles, right? That's my goal. Is the Magnum is always slightly less than
2.
the 750 equivalent.
Yeah.
And for you listeners out there who don't know this, and you're saying, but there's a plastic bag, the plastic bag is less effective to greenhouse gases than the glass bottles,
right?
As we've talked about
No,
many times.
it's not. There's no perfect solution.
No.
And if we did 3,000 cases into plastic bags, then you'd be talking about like some serious plastic waste. But just sort of like and this goes to Kim Nichols when she was on here, a year ago this time, is that if you can like find every little lever and turn it down a little bit.
I'll tell you another lever, and that's Roundup. Roundup prevents the soil carbon sequestration.
Right. There we go.
As I heard from Bob Kremer in my last talk with him. So one more
Well,
reason.
if the plants are dead, they're not bringing carbon out of the air and putting it into the soil.
Well,
I didn't do much science, but I got that one.
Well, they're not. The plant you care about, the vine, is not able to suck up the manganese that it needs and other trace minerals.
So there is real science there. It's not just as simple as my understanding.
No, but Sam, I mean, because I always quote you with that. If you don't want your plants to die, quit spraying.
Don't spray plant killer
on it. But everybody says, well, but it doesn't affect the vine. But it does. It doesn't allow it to pick up the manganese.
And scientists know that.
It kills all the biodiversity. I mean, it's got to kill that stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a big Austrian study where like 50% less soil microbial life when they use Roundup compared to.
And Sam, I think the only way to get around all that packaging is, in the French corner boutiques or little tiny stores, they just tap it right out of a large tub on the top, and you fill your carafes and take it home.
I mean, there wasn't that long ago, John, that's how most of the wine left Sonoma Valley.
Yeah.
Was either in tanks or barrels, put on trains and shipped to the East Coast, where it was bottled at the grocery store that sold it.
A la Pedroncelli.
A la Pedroncelli, a la Sebastiani, a la the Rossi Ranch. And as we've moved towards California wine being fine wine, collectible, age-worthy, that model doesn't really fit anymore. And, that barrel that's sitting in a grocery store getting, people filling off of it, or are they topping it? Are they gassing the top of it? Is it oxidizing? It's definitely not like...
it's co-op wine.
Yeah, it's not something that you're putting in your cellar and saving for Christmas Eve dinner. You're drinking it.
Yeah.
So that model doesn't fit exactly anymore the way that we make for the wines that we want to make. But if we can put it into a reusable bottle that we get back,
or a box
that reduces a whole bunch of that waste, again, that's just finding these levers and turning them down a little bit.
I just saw an interesting piece on French bread. there's a patisserie on every corner, and you go buy your loaves of bread. And then, you eat them within a day or two. And how American bread, once they started slicing
American
it.
bread. I've never heard that term.
American bread. I'm American bread.
And they slice it, and how it goes bad so rapidly when it's sliced, and then they add all of these other things, and how crappy
And it
it
has
is.
Roundup in it from
And
the
it all has
desiccant.
Roundup.
Bingo.
And that's not to be like overstated as somebody who doesn't eat gluten.
Yeah.
All the people who are now having these problems with these grains, and to sort of the wheat grown in America, within a week before it's harvested, it is sprayed top to bottom with Roundup so that it dries out and weighs less between the field and the mill. Like, that's really what it's about. And sure, maybe there's like some slight carbon footprint decrease because you're using a little less diesel to drive it from the field to the mill, but they're just accelerating the drying out process with Roundup for cost savings. And literally the wheat that you eat that comes from a conventionally grown,
Soaked.
it's been soaked in Roundup
So-
just before it was
so-
harvested.
so
Like
what-
at the
Soybeans
peak
too.
of ripeness.
Yeah.
So what we're seeing in the Italian study it's called Ramazzini Institute, which is devoted to worker health and safety, is that before Roundup, we associated it with non-Hodgkin lymphoma, which is a form of cancer, and that's what all the lawsuits have been about. The new study is showing it causes leukemia. And the leukemia that it's causing is happening earlier in the rats' lives than any previous studies of any substance have shown. So they're dying extremely early deaths, which the researchers were like, wow, we've never seen this before. So Ramazzini has a great website it's the glyphosatestudy.org or .com. And they have published their findings, and they did this in a hurry because they wanted to get in before the EU voted on whether to continue the Roundup license or not. And because nobody could come to a conclusion, nobody wanted to alienate the farmers who vote. The consumers have already voted in public opinion polls saying we don't want Roundup. We want it to be gone. And that's from surveys from Pesticide Action Network in the EU. We don't have any surveys in the United States where I don't think the awareness level is as high. But we're seeing, there's nothing that says Roundup is safer over time. And the tiniest amounts is kind of another area of research that's being done at King's College in London. And they're seeing that it's genotoxic at very low doses. It goes in. People didn't think that human beings would be affected because we don't have the Shikate pathway, Shikate. But the bacteria that live in our guts do, and that's what's happening. So we're seeing accelerated uptake of glyphosate and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So the warning signs are not hitting you over the head, but they're there. And if you're sort of listening in on the conversation that's happening in major credentialed scientific circles, it's not positive.
So we're talking about European awareness and American awareness. I thought Roundup was pretty much an American product.
Well, they'd love for you to think that, wouldn't they?
But
You don't think Monsanto, now Bayer,
yes,
has always had it across the
Well,
world?
I'll tell you, Bayer has suffered more than anyone. They have lost half of their market value. Half. And it's directly attributable to the lawsuits. And they've already committed to paying out $11 billion.
Ouch.
Yeah.
There you go.
I watch DW, which is the PBS station of Germany, on YouTube, and in English, and they have German parents, grandparents, very upset with Bayer for laying off their children who are supporting their grandchildren, and saying, how could the company be so mismanaged? Everyone wondered why they bought Monsanto and warned against it, but anyway, that's history.
Is there a point where the amount of money that Bayer Monsanto is paying out in these lawsuits matches or beats the amount of money they're making selling this product, and all of these bans and licensing agreements and Napa Greens, not using Roundup efforts, essentially become obsolete because they just stop selling it because they're losing too much money in lawsuits. Then they're selling it, or is that the amount of money is that just like a pipe dream? The amount of profit that they're gaining on this product is so high that they can pay out $11 billion in lawsuits, and it doesn't really.
Well, they thought about not selling it residentially anymore, and they announced a couple of years ago that they were going to stop that.
Right.
But I don't know if they actually followed through on that.
There were, I can tell you, I was in Friedman Brothers the other day, and I walked down that aisle, and it's there. But there was a time where it was not in Friedman Brothers for quite a while. I can't tell you what that era, but there was talk of them stop selling it. It was only going to be commercial at some point, but it obviously didn't happen.
Yeah, I think it's kind of waiting for the wind to blow. Which way is the wind blowing?
Yeah.
Well, Sam, I think they're probably approaching that point. $11 billion is not chump change.
Or are they?
Well, they try to get out of it. They've had a lot of awards reduced, and they're going to fight it all the way to the Supreme Court.
Of course. And then there's the legal cost. Yeah.
Well, that's nothing for them.
Right, those lawyers are all on retainer anyway. Might as well give them something to do.
But they're medical experts. I attended the first trial. It was called multi-district litigation, where they thought these cases would be tried all over the country. And I saw on Twitter that the IARC scientists, the UN cancer risk experts, who were the first to sound the warning, which is what scientific bodies do versus regulatory bodies. And so I listened to all the testimony from the experts for the plaintiffs. So they try to decide in a multi-district litigation thing, it's called a Doe-Bear hearing. They try to decide what scientists are credible. So they don't want junk scientists to be able to testify in all these cases around the country. So they have one judge who listens in, and this judge was a very interesting guy. I looked at him, and he was so pro Monsanto in the beginning. He had no idea that anything untoward could have happened. And his sympathies were clear. After he listened to the plaintiff's witnesses, which included several of the major toxicology experts from the United States government, some of them retired, but all of them completely expert in their field, renowned experts. All the early animal studies showed all these rodents dying from Roundup. So then they had to go to the EPA, the Monsanto people, and lobby. And they lobbied. And during the Bush era, they got what they wanted. Then they've never sort of turned the corner since then. Although there's a big piece in The Guardian this week about from a former EPA employee talking about all the problems that they've had because they don't outlaw things that are clearly toxic. And so she's one of the first whistleblowers to come forward. And that article is written by Carrie Gillum, who has been following all this and has a great book about Roundup. A couple books, actually. Anyway, I'm losing my train of thought. Back to...
I distracted you by taking your picture.
Oh. I was distracted.
I got the Slow Wine Guide and my Viva Agricultural Organica from EcoFarm, which I'm sad to hear that you won't be at EcoFarm
because I have to go to biodiversity.
In Avignon. Yeah. Maybe Brian and I will join you.
We'll just be in
Sorry, DTC Symposium. Sorry, EcoFarm.
I was going to say,
see you next year.
Business is really good at 16,600, I guess.
It's a very inexpensive conference. It's only €250.
It's not the conference.
I know. It's winter airfare.
Wine and dinners that I'm going to buy. And I'm in Avignon, and Kelly McAuliffe shows up, and Julian Burrow shows up, and we'll get Isabel up from Nîmes,
and Sam, you gotta fly first class or at least business,
at the very least. When you pay more for your first class ticket, it makes up for some of the carbon footprint of your flying, right?
Absolutely. Plus, it'll probably take a couple full weeks to, get over there.
Yeah.
Relax, then do the symposium. Go to Paris.
Althea will be done with high school by then.
Oh my! Well, any other shout-outs, guys and Pam?
I'm going to shout out as of Friday. You can call me directly. At this point, it's not up on the website, but you can call me and start making appointments at the Tank.
The Tank Room?
Yeah, 707-529-5856.
And we stopped by.
707-529-5856.
We stopped by the other day. It's
Did you?
very cool.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got a couple cool chairs in there. I mean, I was just...
Do we have an ETO estimated?
Well, today's 30 days that the license has been hanging.
You posted it today.
No, it's been hanging for 30 days.
Okay.
So it's been done. So I need to make a phone call and see what's up. But yeah, it's really starting to like kind of come around. We got a nice rug in there, so it's softened it a little bit. I was able to position the lights. There's a section of the tank where the paneling that they did for warmness in the room, it's the actual tank itself and the roof. So all the history kind of in that.
Where is it?
In Glen Ellen, right across from Jack London Village.
And how many gallon tank is it?
I mean, I need to actually get out the measurement, but I think it's like a 14,000 gallon tank. Although when I look at it, it looks like it's not that big. So I have to finish doing my math calculation.
Maybe they lost a couple thousand gallons when they moved it across the street.
Well, no, because it's funny because where the door position and where the valve is, they're in the place that it should be. Okay. So I don't think they did. And it's funny, you can see the numbers when they took it apart and put it back together. Because they numbered each stave.
They took it apart stave by stave.
Yeah.
And then moved it across the street. And
so
it's
Pam,
funny.
Probably had to take it apart to get it out of the
tasting room is
right?
in
the
tank.
Right. I stopped by and was talking to Hardy the other day, and I told him about it, and he was asking me. He goes, wait a minute. He goes, you're gonna taste in the tank?
In the tank.
How cool was that?
So,
but was it? Do you know when it stopped being used actually for winemaking and became a?
my research paper that I'm working on is getting there, collecting this information. I've got a bunch of really good stuff. I think it was sometime in the 60s. I think it was at the time that Pagani sold the property to the last owners. And then when the last owner,
Pagani's owned that that's where the Pagani's.
Not that Pagani.
Not that Pagani.
The Pagani of the vineyard in Kenwood, right? The Alicante vineyard that changes, that Pagani, not the Pagani of Kenwood winery, right? Those were two different Pagani families.
So the ones who have the vineyard that everybody
takes their picture
of because maybe it's virus, maybe it's Alicante,
right?
Turns red in October,
right?
And has the big white barn in the background.
And then
so that's the same Pagani as the winery. As the facility in Glen Ellen.
Right. And then it was also Chevet had it as a winery.
Okay.
And then that's the original Glen Ellen winery and distillery.
Right, where everybody made their wine.
Right.
And it's a cool building, John. You go in there across the street from where Bart's office is, and there's like a real estate office that is literally carved out of the concrete tanks that were the wine making tanks.
Is this on the Jack London Village?
Yeah, it is exactly
Jack London Village.
Okay.
So that's where the tank was originally located, and then so at one point the person who owned that owned both sides of the road, and they sold the Jack London Village side to a new entity, and when they did that, they took one of the tanks and moved it across the street and put it next to it was a storage barn and a workshop is what is now Eric Ross.
Okay. Yeah.
So
he's been there for
it's interesting. Time. I mean, he originally was across the street, but yeah, talking to Eric, and we have to get him on the show because he was a professional photographer for the San Francisco Chronicle. He's got some amazing pictures in his place, but he's been at it over 30 years. Yeah. Just kind of quietly, kind of doing it, and has been making Grenache for a long time, and the wines are nice.
Cool.
Yeah. So anyway, that's all I got.
Anything else, Pam?
No, just slowwineusa.com.
Perfect.
Buy a copy of the book. I've always wanted to have a stack here to sell.
We do wholesale. There's and the FAQs.
Perfect.
How do you do it? The code you put in, you get 30% off.
Okay.
On 10 copies or more.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And Marty O'Reilly, New Year's Eve. When does that start?
So, show starts at 9 or 9:30. I think doors are at 8.
About the time we go to bed.
Yeah,
So.
exactly. If this is still a little bit up in the air, but the goal, weather depending, is that we're gonna start here with a little reception, 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then do a second line from here to Valley, where we'll gather up the Valley crew because Littleworth is opening with Tanner Wally's band. They're the supporting act, and then second line, Marty's hired a horn section for his show for the night, and so they're going to lead the second line around the plaza to the Sebastiani Theater and show up there, as doors open at 8:30 or so. For those who say nothing happens in Sonoma on New Year's Eve, we're changing all that.
He has been posting some of their practice rehearsal sections, and they are good.
I asked him about doing some Tower of Power songs, and he said he was working on a Chicago song, which, remember Chicago with the great horn section? And yeah.
I mean, Sam, to your point about changing things up in Sonoma, did you see Del Santina has new hats this year, and their hats say, "Make Sonoma late again"?
I mean, it is the hardest place to get a bite to eat after 8 o'clock at night. I mean, it's like, we roll up the streets and turn the street lights off at 9 p.m. So, it's going to be a good one. I think you go to SebastianiTheater.com to buy tickets for it. But it is a vinyl Sunday. It's a Sunday. New Year's Eve this year is a Sunday night.
Well, and this episode comes out on December 22nd, so we should take an opportunity to wish everybody happy holidays and nice little time off. And
we can say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
We can say Merry Christmas now. The
Happy
war of Christmas
holidays,
is over.
man.
Yeah, why not? I don't know. There's a bunch of holidays.
Merry everything.
Merry fucking everything.
That's it. Perfect, Sam. Merry fucking everything.
And then we'll have it. We're recording a second episode this week.
Right.
So we'll have one coming out right before New Year's. We'll say wish you Happy New Year on that one.
Right.
Absolutely.
And tell you what champagne to drink.
Right. And maybe we can try to figure out what's going to happen in the new year.
Perfect.
Right. Our top 10.
What happened in the past year?
There you go.
Wow.
I think both of those are really ambitious goals.
It's just been an awesome year, Pam. Awesome year.
Yeah,
Great.
Yeah.
Great summer. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening again. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Drink more slow wine.
Drink slow wine.
And look it
Drink
up.
slow wine slowly.
I like
You
it.
got it.
Open bottles quickly. Drink slowly.
Right. There you go.
All right, everybody. Thanks. See you next week.